Welcome to the Gritty Podcast, folks. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am joined by my brother, the Gritty Broman. How are you, Brent?
I'm well, thank you.
We've been out of studio for a while, kind of winging it with podcasts, but I've been out hunting spring bear. And right now, for those that don't know, if you've been living under a rock, we have some great video out on YouTube that's crushing. So go check that out. We had a 4-part series that we did early spring where we took 4 bears. And now we have another 4-part series that we've done late spring. We've just done episode 1. So there's 3 more coming your way. And they're super cool shows. The feedback has been...
I would say we might be a little biased, about how good they are, but there's some great comments.
Yeah, there really has been some great feedback. So, in fact, we've got a few questions from that I think maybe the podcast listeners might want us to just kind of cover here. So Brent's going to throw a few our way. But before we do that, I want to remind you to help us out. Support the podcast, support the films by
buying some
gear. Stuff. Yeah. That we have some new products that we've kind of partnered up with that I think are pretty legit, and I think you're going to like these. So you guys get a discount, and we get a kickback, and it's a win-win for everybody. So one of them, the new one of them that we just did from last week is sheep feet, and some of you caught that podcast, some of you didn't, but they are boot inserts. Lampers has been using his for like 9 months or something like that. And I just got my pair about a week ago, and I've been using them non-stop. In fact, today's podcast is with Barney from Eastman's Elevated podcast. Brian's just a hunting machine. And I was at the Western Hunting Summit last week with Ryan Lampers. And Brian was one of the presenters there, along with like Randy Newberg and Cody Rich and Mark Livesey and others, Dan Picard from Eastman's. And I was able to sit down with Brian Barney. It was the first time we'd actually met. And we also did a partner workout. Yeah, it's funny. Like some people in the industry I've actually never met face to face.
But I have just had to have been circling each other all the time.
We know all the same people, So it was really neat to sit down with him. It was good to see a seminar and take that in on spot and stalk elk hunting, which is the subject of today's podcast. And then we were able to, we did a workout together. I didn't bring tennis shoes because I wasn't planning on doing a workout. And Dan Staten of Elk Shape, he did a workout at the summit, and all I had was my boots.
Your Crispies?
Some crispy boots. And they're more like, they're Monacos. They're more like a, kind of a dress boot that you just wear, not really a performance boot. Anyway, I have these sheep feet soles in them, and I've been walking around in them all week, and I was like, man, these are really comfy. I mean, these are providing some serious support in a boot that otherwise isn't really built for that. And then, so I did the workout in the sheep feet inserts in the boots, ran a half a mile, come back. We did our workout, lots of squats, burpees, and so on. And then you run another half a mile. And I was shocked I played off like the boots were really, really difficult to perform in.
Oh my God.
Like this is tough. But actually, they were kind of like tennis shoes with these inserts. I'm not joking. So, the truth is, if they weren't good, Lampers wouldn't be using them. But also, I'm thinking, why didn't Ryan tell me about his little secret weapon? Because usually what fails you on long, long hikes in the mountains are your feet.
Yep.
90% is your feet. When Ryan and I were talking this last trip, because we put on some serious miles on our hikes, on day-to-day hikes, Ryan was telling me that he did the death hike a few times with the XO guys, Steve Speck and crew. They would go on these 100-mile hikes just to do them. And Ryan, I think, did his 100-mile hike in 17 hours or something like that. Like, he didn't stop, I believe. I can't remember. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he just did it consecutively and never stopped, while others spent the night, took like 2 days to do it or something. Anyway, Ryan was saying those kind of miles, when you had dropouts at like mile 30 or mile 50 or mile 70, most of the time it was because the feet were done. They were blistered, they were sore, they were torn up, something like that. They just got too hot and on fire. So that can happen. So anyway, check those out. Use the code Gritty and you save at Sheep Feet. It's all caps, I think, Gritty, the code, and it helps us out. And I'm going to continue testing them, but I'm really confident in that product. I'm pretty stoked on it. And then Alpaca Rafts, we've mentioned them a bunch of times. They're in the films. Save quite a bit, 10% on your raft if you use the code Gritty 2020 at Alpaca Rafts. So check that out. That's changing the game. I love the raft. I would own the raft whether I hunted or didn't hunt, because all the places you can backpack and float it's fun and practical. Goat Knives. Our friend Travis Nowotny came out with a new product. It's called a goat knife. It's really cool. Ryan and I have been using it on the last couple of hunts.
If you watch the last couple of videos, you probably saw them.
You probably saw them. You get a big discount if you use the code Gritty Goat. So check that out. If you have a replacement blade knife or you need a skinning knife, it's legit. You can. It's got these little like holders for Allen keys, and you can select. It comes with Allen keys, and you can select which keys you want in the handle or screwdriver or whatever. If you got your bow out there, you can grab all the keys that you need for your bow, or you can grab all the keys you need for your rifle scope or whatever, and they kind of come with it. It's multifunctional. It's got a little bit of paracord there for emergency uses and so on the handle. It fits real nice in your hand. It's got good grip. I really like it. It's probably my favorite right now. It's titanium. It weighs nothing. It's very technical, practical, multi-use. It's pretty cool. Check that out at goatknives.com. Use the code GrittyGoat for that big discount. And then this week, we also have a podcast that we recorded at the Western Hunting Summit with our friend Mark Livesey. And Mark has a sweet new online academy he has started. And this is on basically on e-scouting. And it's probably one of the best e-scouting resources and courses I've ever seen. And I think it was featured in Outdoor Life. I know it's Cody Rich has had him on the podcast. I think Ryan Lampers has. And he presented his content at the Western Hunting Summit. And he had this whole PowerPoint and all this stuff, and it's mind blowing. And his pitch is, find your elk from your kitchen table, or from your from your office at home. Literally, this course is phenomenal. It'll teach you all you need to know. So many new tips and tricks. I didn't know half of it, and I fancy myself a pretty decent map guy and scouter and all that. This is next level, worth every penny. So you can save there too using the code GRITTY. Check that out. It's at Treeline Pursuits. Go to that website, treelinepursuits.com, and then go to the Treeline Academy link, and boom, you're there. And then, as always, use the code GRITTY at Mountain Ops. Save on free shipping. Use the code GRITTY at Sissy Sticks. Get yourself some sweet trekking poles. Same at... And finally, I'm going to plug one more, which is Valkyrie Archery. Right now, we're ramping up for archery season. That's the new focus right now. We got September elk hunts. I got a bunch of those. I'm going to try real hard to film those. I got one with my good friend Brad Hunt, who intern Brad, who is I think it's 17 elk in 17 years now with his bow.
I think it's 17 and 18 because he broke his knee one year.
Yeah, 17 and 18 years, something like that.
Yeah,
so he's an animal. But I got one hunt with Brad, and then I have another hunt with Lampers for elk. So hopefully in a couple different states. So hopefully we bring you some really sick archery elk content this year. But I use Black Eagle X Impact micro diameter shafts with the Valkyrie Archery broadhead delivery system. Sick broadheads, heavy front of center. And I love how effective they are. I love shooting with broadheads, like practicing all day, every day with my actual broadheads on my actual arrow that I'm actually going to kill with.
Yeah,
I don't like
nice.
Field tips and then going to broadheads and all of that.
Didn't have to retune them.
When I go to a 3D course or I do a total archery challenge, of course I can't use broadheads, but the rest of the time I'm flinging broadheads. If you do it right, though, your broadheads and your field tips will tune to the same spot. They will hit the same impact point. And mine is like that, but when you get a good wind or things, I just want to know it's on. So check that out. It's at Valkyrie Archery. So today's podcast is with Brian Barney. We get into spot and stalk elk hunting. For those who have been listening to Barney for a long time, you know he's a killer. I mean, I've followed him for a really long time, just kind of from the outside looking in. And he's got a real chill personality. He kind of reminds me of like a surfer hunter.
He is not what you expect. I've heard the name Brian Barney. I've heard Ryan talk about him. I've heard Brian quote him. I've never listened to his podcast or anything like that. And then I saw him and I was like, oh, that's Brian Barney. And it was a picture on Instagram and he was in his camo. And I was like, that guy looks like a killer. Mm-hmm. And then I saw him at the Western Hunting Expo and he looks, not being mean, he looks a little frail. And then he spoke and his voice does not match him at all. Like he does sound like a surfer dude, but he looks like when I met him and shook his hand, he's not a giant dude. He's a slim, lean dude. We did our workout together and the man's a beast. He looks like a long distance runner.
When we did the workout and we were jogging, so my strength is not the
running.
jog. It's not the running.
I feel like we have short lungs in our family, just little lungs.
So I knew once we got back and we did like 200 squats and air squats and we did
bunch of burpees
100 push-ups and 50 synchronized burpees. Like when we got to that, I have great cardio in those activities and good muscle endurance, like crazy muscle endurance. But there's a certain pace speed I have at which I can run, and it red lines pretty early. But I can stick that, but I can't go much faster than that. And so we're on the run, and Barney's running next to me, and he's just having this conversation.
How's it going, bro?
You know, what's going on, how many kids he's got, and all that. And he's talking as though he's sitting here with you and me, no breathing, normal. And I'm like, got 3 kids. I got 3 kids. My oldest is 16. Dude, I hate that about me, but it's just the way I'm. It's how I am. And the same thing happens to me when I hike with Ryan all day. You know, we climb a hill. I'm breathing 3 times as hard as Ryan breathes. You know, on downhill, I don't breathe hardly at all. I mean, I'm made for that. Don't sweat too much either. It's just everybody's going to have a different set of genes and physical abilities and so on.
It's the same thing with hunting. Everyone, that's I think the big takeaway that I got from this podcast was everyone needs to figure out where their strengths lie when it comes to hunting. And you and Barney both decided your strengths are not with calling.
Good point. Foreshadowing on this next show. I would really resonated with Barney's
spot and stalk,
with his spot and stalk seminar.
Spot and stalk or die.
I mean, he talked about other, just elk hunting in general, but definitely we resonated because I've sort of hung up the calls myself. Last year when I solo hunted, I didn't use calls except maybe to figure out where elk were.
It's extra weight.
And then it was like they didn't come out of my pocket. And the couple of times I used calls, they kind of wrecked my
stock.
Yeah. So Brian is a killer, killing old bulls, not using calls much. And it's really useful to sit down and talk to him. He's killed way more elk than I have with a bow. And he's got that experience. And Ryan doesn't call either, but from those who have hunted with him or know Ryan, he does rake for like a mother. They're like, he just rakes and rakes and rakes trees endlessly. And he told me that like 4 years ago. He will just rake and rake and rake. And he leaned to me during the seminar and he's like, I just rake to make up for my poor calling skills. Like, but,
yeah. Find where your skills lie and lean into that.
I know that for Ryan's a killer and he wants to kill the mature, oldest animal he can find. Same with Barney. When you call, especially in public land hunts that we do, high pressure,
satellites.
You kind of have whatever comes in. And every now and then you can coax a giant bull from its herd, but usually you don't. You coax something lesser in. Now, if you work long enough and hard enough at it, you're going to get the bull you want to finally break away. I also think there's next level callers like Corey Jacobson, that can somehow, I've seen him, I've watched him. He can somehow coax the biggest bull to leave his cows. Most callers I've ever seen can't do that. They can pull in bulls, yes, but they can't pull in the bull. So
It's a good podcast. You guys are going to enjoy it.
So I think you'll like it. So before we jump into that, check out our videos. There was a couple of questions people asked. I thought we'd do before we launch into the podcast with Barney. One of them was about tick management.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of people asking us about ticks. So let me just give you a real quick rundown. James, Sylvester, Sly, and myself are quite vigilant about checking our bodies for ticks on the regular. Typically what happens when I wake up in the morning, I pull my shirt off. I ask James to take a peek. I look, see if I can find a tick on my body anywhere. And then I go over around a tree or something and I drop my drawers and I check, around the rest of my legs and everything else.
Give yourself a strong physical.
A little check. I'm a little too, I'm not okay with having someone help me look below the waist. That's a one-man, that's a solo job. Then throughout the day, I'm constantly doing the same thing. I pull my shirt off. I look for a few ticks. I ask James to check if James is with us. Now and then I'll ask Ryan to check. But for the most part, when a tick gets on our body, and this is for all three of us, they don't dig in right away. Mm-hmm. They sort of just, it's like they walk around on you or just sit there for 24 hours or more.
It's like a dog trying to go to the bathroom.
They just
walk around until they find that one spot. This is where it's going to happen.
And I think we sweat a lot from all our travel. And I've noticed that when you're sweaty, the ticks don't seem to, maybe it's the moisture or whatever, but they're even less likely to try to find a spot. So we can have ticks on us. We don't know how long they're there. I found some in my armpit, in my belly button, on my body, but we always get them before they dig in. And so I think it's the thing to do is kind of to check throughout the day, every few hours or hour or two, or if you suspect you went through a lot of thick brush and ticks have maybe come off the bushes and stuff, or along a river, a water line seems to be really bad, a game trail, we just stop and check. And so far, I've never had one dig in. And Ryan hasn't had one dig in, I think, maybe once in his life or something. Mm-hmm. And James had two go right into his chest or something. He's paranoid as hell about
How do you
ticks.
not feel that?
One of the things, so checking all the time helps. The other thing that we've done is we've sprayed permethrin on our pants, from, basically we spray it on before we go on our trip, give it a heavy coat, spray wash permethrin on our pants.
And then touch it up when you're out there?
And then it dries. And it's supposed to stay on your pants for a month. But once it's dried, it's pretty safe. There's issues with permethrin messing with your body and it's toxic, But so far we haven't, I don't know, none of us have experienced any negative health thing from it, even though none of us like to use it. But I'd prefer that over Rocky Mountain fever, or worse, Lyme disease. So we spray down our pants pretty thoroughly, and then we spray our backpack a lot. So we've all noticed that for some reason our Stone Glacier packs can just get ticks crawling all over them. I think it's just as you're walking through the bushes and
they just fall.
They just end up there, and then they crawl from your pack to your body, or you set your pack down constantly on the ground and you pick it back up and put it on. Well, it's just covered in ticks from dropping it on the ground in a certain spot. So what we've done is we spray the backpack down thoroughly. And then again, it's not really necessarily against my skin. So I feel better about having that sprayed down than a shirt or pants or anything else. But we spray the backpack down pretty solid. And what I've noticed is a tick will get on your pack or it'll get on your pants. It'll kind of crawl around. And it doesn't necessarily kill the tick right away, but it seems to make them drunk and slow and then even less likely to dig in. And so that's kind of how we've done it. But we're hunting in some heavily tick-infested areas, and then bears have a lot of ticks. Ryan's interesting because he'll get ticks on him, and they all go to the same spot, right here behind his long hippie hair, right behind his ear on his neck, every single time. So Ryan just waits till he feels them on his neck, and he pulls them off. He doesn't bother checking the rest of his body because they don't seem to ever find an armpit or they just like his hair. I don't know what it is.
That is weird.
And he'll pull a tick and he'll throw it, and pull a tick and he'll throw it, and it's always from the same 2 spots behind his hair. I don't know. It's weird, huh? Belly buttons, that's kind of a spot they like to go.
That's a go-to. Armpits
a little bit, but up behind my ear and my hairline too.
What do you do when you get a tick and it's dug in?
So that's best to just Google that. Look up and watch a video. There's really no good way about it, because when you get a tick and you're trying to get it out, it will leave toxins in you.
Will it just leave eventually, or is it there and it's staying?
Oh, it's staying. I mean, they just fill up with blood and they get massive, a huge bump. Like, you have to get it removed. You have to get it out. Don't let one dig in. That's really the key. So one of the things that we do with my ground cloth, what I've done is I've sprayed my ground cloth heavily all on the edges with permethrin. And then when ticks crawl onto the ground cloth, they hit that toxin and then they kind of die out, We haven't used, I'm not opposed to, if you're willing to carry the weight, having a seek outside nest. So they have the mesh nest that you can, and floor, the kit that you can buy that goes with your teepee or anything else. And that allows you to be protected from, bugs, rattlesnakes, scorpions, you name it, ticks. So as long as you're clean before you go in to the nest, you're fine. But we're just too late. We don't want to pack that weight, so we like the benefits of a ground cloth, in a floorless shelter. It's really only a springtime thing. I really don't have to worry about it during elk season. It's colder, ticks. It's a spring thing, and it's real intense in the spring. After that, not really an issue. I rarely find a tick on me otherwise, but that's about it. We just check each other all the time, every 2 or 3 hours. James and I check, and I usually have one on me. Ryan just picks them off his hair and his neck, throughout the day. Again, you find them all over, and they're on your body constantly, but they don't burrow. They don't dig in. That's been our experience. So we don't stress about it too much. James does. James freaks out, but Ryan and I are like, oh, another tick. Just pull them off and chuck them.
Nope.
I feel very confident that as long as I check every few hours, I'll have them on me, but I won't have one dig in. Now, Ryan said this the other day to me. He's like, if ticks got on you like a mosquito, the human race would be wiped out.
Yes.
Because you're getting them on you constantly. If they dug in the second they got on you, you'd have ticks all the time. You'd have a serious problem. But they don't. They kind of just get there and hang out for a day or two before they finally dig in. So as long as you can, you check, you're pretty good. Now, that's been my experience. I'm not saying that's the same in the East Coast or anywhere else. It's just where we've hunted and the conditions we've been in, that's been the case. So, all right, folks. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Check it out. It's with Brian Barney. And don't forget to help us out. Use those codes to save on some gear. And as always, stay gritty. All right, folks. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. Today I'm joined by Brian Barney. And I'm here at the Western Hunting Summit. Ryan Lampers has been putting on, and Brian, you spoke today. And for people who don't know a little bit about you, give us a little synopsis about kind of your background. You do the Eastman's podcast. Is it Eastman's Elevated?
That's correct.
Podcast, and you've been doing the podcast thing since 2016. And I've heard a lot about you from Ryan at first. I watched you hunt with Remy a little bit. I've seen you on some Instagram stories, and then I started following your podcast and more content. And Ryan is a big fan. He's always talking about Brian Barney. And he had this quote that he used a lot, by the way, like patience kills the buck. And he was saying that a lot. Well, I didn't know he heard that from you. That's where he got it first. So I want to have you on the podcast today. I want to talk about a little bit what you touched on earlier today in your seminar at this summit. And you're kind of, a man after my own heart when you said you like to spot and stalk elk, more than call, or that kind of your go-to method. So I want to get into that today on today's podcast. But before that, give the people that are listening a little, background on who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name's Brian Barney. I live in Ennis, Montana. I'm south of Bozeman. I moved to Ennis, Montana at 19 after high school. And in high school, I learned some good lessons in sports and in wrestling and really dedicated myself to getting as good as I could get in wrestling. The very top of the heap, and constantly wrestling in different leagues, freestyle and Greco and collegiate, wrestling with guys that were better than me. And I had a state champion in front of me that I got to wrestle with that taught me the ways. And so I learned all these great lessons about, the harder you work at something, the more you achieve, the better you get at it. And so it taught me a lot of good life lessons. But after high school, I was a little lost. And my family, my dad had always taken me hunting, and we grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so right around Olympia, Washington. And so we hunted blacktails and Roosevelts, and we weren't very good at it, but we hunted hard. Yeah. So we beat the brush. We were in the Pacific Northwest. I think we could have been more effective even driving skidder roads, as those are openings in the brush where the deer cross a lot. But that's not what my dad had in store for me as a kid. My dad had we threw on the Helly Hansen rain gear and we put in miles. Yeah. And we just still hunted through that stuff until we bumped into a deer, bumped into an elk. And so we ended up killing a few along the way. And it was a really good experience for me and something that I fell in love with. And then at 15, I worked all summer so I could buy a bow. And I was the first one in my family to get a bow and bow hunt. And I just loved the idea of it getting close. And back in that day, there wasn't much writing on it, but there was this guy, Chuck Adams, that always had this giant smile and this beanie on his head, killing these giant animals. I thought, boy, that looks pretty cool. A guy gets close to him. And so I got a bow and arrow. Gosh, I killed a cow elk.
What was your first bow? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was a Hoyt. It was a Hoyt. I still have it. Yeah, it's got some old rattle cans. It's a compound, barely. It's got some wheels on it. They're not very big. But I practiced all summer. I got good with it. And then, heck, I had a herd of elk run into me by myself back in the woods behind the house, and I arrowed a cow elk, and my dad couldn't believe it. I don't think he thought that bow could kill anything. I think he really thought there's no way he's going to kill anything out there. And I come back and I said, hey, I killed a cow elk, and I didn't know how to gut it. I didn't know how to do anything. I think I killed maybe a spike before that with my rifle, or a couple deer maybe. But yeah, I killed that first elk with the bow, and my dad helped me get it out. And then the next year I killed a blacktail with my bow during this late season. And so that kind of got me hooked. And so after wrestling was over, I was really searching for what to do. And living in Olympia, Washington, the outdoor opportunities were just limited. And so I kind of stole my dad's dream. He had come out of state to Montana, to Ennis, Montana, hunting for elk with his rifle. And he had this contact out here, and he stayed with him. And he was always telling me about this adventure out there. So we'd be on hunts, and he'd tell me about the snow in Montana and seeing these bulls and these big muley bucks. I was like, man, that looks like the place to be. So out of high school, I didn't really focus on my schoolwork. I wish I would have worked harder at it, but it's not really how us guys learn. Us guys learn in stuff that we're really interested in. And if I'm really interested in it, I'll learn everything about it and get as good as I can get it. But, algebra wasn't what I was passionate about.
Right.
And so I just kind of got out of high school. Thought, now college isn't really for me. So I got a construction job, but I ended up meeting my dad's contact out here. I moved out to Ennis, Montana, and I could not get enough of it. I just immersed myself in the outdoors and learn as much as I can. I was hunting elk, hunting sheds. I was hunting mule deer, hunting bears, but all real locally around my drainage, because I had a Chevy truck that I probably couldn't even drive out of the drainage. I could hardly make it to Bozeman. The thing was constantly breaking down on me.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of money, just a carpenter. And so, but I just immersed myself in it and did all my free time out in the outdoors. And so I started paying my dues. And through paying my dues, I started building a skill set. And through that skill set, I started to be consistently successful and started arrowing animals and shooting good quality animals with my rifle. And it was about 15 years ago. I just got such a rush out of getting close and putting a good arrow. And it was like the most difficult thing on planet Earth that I'd ever tried. And then, to reach that pinnacle and arrow a good animal, it was so fulfilling. And so instantly I saw the payoff and I was hooked. And so then I was willing to put the work into it. So then that's when I started to put all those wrestling lessons in there. And I'm like, gosh, if I was in better shape, I could climb this mountain better. And so nobody's really running or training, but now I'm out on the trails and I'm running and I'm running, half marathons and really trying to get myself in shape, taking my shooting to another level, shooting leagues and, learning about bows and just learning everything I could about it. And through that, I built a good skill set. And then I started to look towards these other adventures and what other states had to offer and started traveling out of state to all these. I used to go to the most killer spots because there was nobody doing it with a bow and arrow. All these sought after muley tags, guys would put in for the rifle tags and take 10 points, but heck, you get the bow tag for 0 or 1 points in these really good units. I didn't have to be that good at research because I could draw really good tags.
Right.
Yeah, and so I started traveling to all these places and started being successful on different species and different habitats with my bow and just fell in love with it, man. I have structured my whole life around bow hunting. And so through that, I started to write about it and started to get published. And then, I wanted to write, Cameron Haynes, like when he started writing for Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal, like he was fire on those pages. I would run to my mailbox to read those pages. Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal, the way he talked about the wilderness and the backcountry and some of that unspoken stuff like fear. And so I just ate it up, solo hunting. And so I just ate it up. I just loved it. And I started traveling all over and started being successful writing about it. And then I started, learning my own tricks and my own personal preferences of how to hunt these things. And like you talked about hunting elk, spot, and stalk, which I'm committed to.
There was so much popularity, and it has been, especially in the age of Primos and all the calling and that whole, the linguistic film, like it was ramping up right around these stages where that was the way to kill elk.
Yep.
And early on, I remember when we first started calling, no one else was doing it. And so we were calling in animals. We're like, oh, this works. But it changed.
It did.
So at what point did you shift from, did you call it first or did you always spot and stalk?
Yeah, I called it first. I watched the Primos videos. I saw calling worked. And so I started working on my calls and calling to these bulls. And yeah, I killed some bulls and my buddies did, family did and things. But I started to find that it was a lot of satellite bulls, a lot of satellite 6 points, and that herd bull was tougher. And so as I started setting my goals higher and higher, I wasn't getting many chances at these bigger bulls, and I found that these bigger bulls, you had to catch them in the right mood, and they may only be in the right mood once a year when they're that fired up, where they're screaming back and forth, where they come in to fight off a bull. And so, I was playing around with satellite bulls that all of a sudden my goals were set a little bit higher to try to kill a herd bull. And also what I found too is just with that pressure, I'd locate a bull way back in the wilderness and drop into that draw and set up right and make a couple cow calls, and he'd bugle back to me. And then all of a sudden I see him and he's going over the ridge and out of that basin. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, because you were saying today in your lecture, you were like, surprise. Surprise is so important. And I said this last year after I finished my solo archery elk hunt. I was like, what I want is I want to go in and I don't want that any elk to ever know that I was ever there. Day in and day out, I want to be able to get in tight, try to kill. If I can, I can. But my goal is for them to never know I was there. And I got in really tight, and there's this bull glunking and going nuts and chasing these cows and going around and just, it was a dream come true. And there was a thicket about 10 yards deep between me and this opening. And on the edge of that opening, that bull was going nuts in a 20 by 20 yard meadow. And it's just forest all the way around. It's thick. I'm like, there's a little trail. I'm walking down that trail. All I got to do is get to the edge of that thicket and I can just kill that bull. I'm almost to the edge of that thicket. I'm about 8 yards away. And that bull is trotting. And he's going to trot and he's going to stop. He's going to go right in front of that window. So I'm like, well, I don't have to get to the edge. I'll just cow call. Stop him right in that opening and smoke him. Mm-hmm. Coming to full draw. He's trotting through. And I'm like, Meow. He just keeps on trotting, glunking, trotting. But every other damned elk in that circle looked right at me. And I was like, there's no elk there. He's oblivious. he didn't follow the script, Barney. And the next thing you know, there I am, at full draw, and everyone blows out. And it's like, all I had to do was not just wait, be a little more patient, and never give up my position. And I would have killed that bull. It was just wind was solid. It wasn't going to change anytime soon. All I needed to do was close. Now, I might have broken a branch or done something, but they were so in the moment. There's no reason I couldn't have closed that other 8 yards in a couple more minutes, moving real slow, and then just taken my opportunity. But now, had it stopped, I'd have been a hero. Mm-hmm. Like, it would have worked just how I planned. But what I realized in hindsight was by giving away my location, I put the ball in their court. I put it all in their court.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep. Like, man, like stalking these elk like that, it's good to look back on it and see, where you made mistakes and where you can improve. And we all as bow hunters make a million of those, throughout our hunting career, but it is learning from. So you're right. Like that mistake came, you had played everything perfect. You were in the perfect set, had set the perfect trap. And like you say, if that bull would have stopped, you were a hero. But if you just would have waited for the right time to draw, you probably would have killed that bull.
And you said that today. You're like, wait for the right time.
Wait for it to develop.
Wait for it to develop. Wait for it to be perfect so you can't screw it up.
Yes.
And that patience is really hard. And it wasn't until I spent a lot of time hunting with lampers that I've cultivated more of that. Because, again, like last year, had I just waited within 4 more minutes, I probably would have killed that bull. That's all it was. But because I was so eager to get it done then, I gambled in a way I didn't really need to. Mm-hmm. And that's been a tough challenge. And so now, and so I later ended up killing that bull. Like 6 days later.
Yeah, how cool.
But it was a grind. It was a real grind. But the thing is when you get into those moments, and it's like you were saying earlier, it really resonated with me. I had new rules I had developed after this. Like, I really am reluctant to ever give away my position when I'm in like that, because if I wait a little bit, it's probably going to turn out.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. That's the way to look at it. So stalking elk, it's this moving flow of a stalk. You get there, you reassess, and then you move again. Get there, reassess, move again. Like, very rarely are you planning out this slow, methodical play like a muley that's going to be there when you get there. So you're right. If you the longer you play the game and let things develop, just the better chance you have at killing that bull. And so a lot of times I'll get in close and a cow will be looking my direction and I'm frozen. And that bull's in the perfect spot and maybe he's at 80 yards. I only need to close 25 yards and it's a dead bull, but I'm frozen. I can't move. And I've just got to let him rut around and then go over the next ridge and then I play again. Mm-hmm. And eventually that bull will put himself in a bad spot. He'll separate from those cows. He'll be close to the ridge line. He'll come to check out those cows that are on that side of the herd, checking cows and moving through. So that's exactly right, Brian. That's how I look at it, is I try to keep the element of surprise and I try to just move in close enough and then let things develop, let things happen. I don't want to stalk recklessly or stalk to failure. I don't want to bust those out. I just take what they give me. So if I run into an elk or if I'm into a scenario where I can't move anymore, I just wait and I just keep playing the game. If they disappear into the deep timber, it's okay. I haven't spooked anything. I'm still playing the game. I can play them in the evening when they come back out in that feeding feature, which is what I prefer. If I know their exact position, I'll stalk them in the timber. If they just disappear into a big timber patch, if I go in there, a lot of times I end up busting them. There's just so many eyes and they're bedded. They're looking every direction. It's really tough to move slow enough and to locate them before they locate me, at least in that thick timber. But yeah, man, if you can just keep playing the game, those situations arise that then you can capitalize on.
This is going to sound off the wall, but when I was younger, grew up out in the sticks in Oregon City, in Oregon. And we would play, we'd have these paintball games that were next level. 20, 30 guys would show up and we would go in the woods and we would just go all commando and shoot, and play these games. Well, one thing I learned, it did help me be a lot more sneaky and move through the woods. It also taught me when to move and when not to move, because you can get frozen out of fear and not advance when you need to advance. Like, you got to go. Like, there might be somebody there to snipe you, but at the same time, you're going to be dead if you don't move. And I remember playing these games, and one trend I noticed was when things got when you got under pressure and you're under fire and there's a group surrounding you, I would be with some dudes. that would be shooting with me, and they would be like under pressure, and they would get to a point where they couldn't handle anymore, and they'd run out and just shoot, and they get themselves shot. And I'm like, what did you do that for? And they're like, I couldn't take it.
They lost their cool, right?
And when you say stalk to failure, you don't want to stalk to failure. That resonates with me because it's like that. I've seen guys, we've been in tight. It's been all day. It's getting close. And like you said, there's a cow that has you locked up, but you only got to go 20 yards and you're going to have a shot. And I've seen way too many guys blow up the hunt because they stalked to failure or because they couldn't take it anymore. But you still have 4 hours left in the day. Mm-hmm. As long as that elk never knows you're there, you're still in the game. So why throw it away?
Man, you're so spot on. Well, Brian, let's pick up this conversation. Yes. We got to get out for the Western Summit, so we'll pick up right where we left off. But man, that's a great point. We were just talking about letting scenarios develop.
Yes.
Like letting those bulls make the last move, like getting in close and then letting things happen, and not stalking to failure. You were bringing up that point as well.
Yes. So about that, when I hunted with Ryan, for the first time, it was Coos Deer, Arizona, January, February with Randy Newberg down there. And Brinker and I were sitting on a hillside, and we're looking down, and there's this giant Coos Deer, Boone and Crockett Coos Deer. Of course, Ryan finds it in the first hour, and he's on it for the next week if he has to. He's going to kill that deer. Well, I'm watching him. He goes down the hill, and it's rutting this doe hard. And there's a little creek bottom, and the buck is standing at the head of that, and the wind is in his favor. It's like, okay, boom. All right. Now, it's Arizona, so when I say creek bottom, it's mostly dry, but there's rock and everything. And I'm looking at that. He's 80 yards from this buck, probably about 80 yards or so. And that buck and doe are kind of doing their thing. Ryan stops at that 80 yards, like right at that creek, and it's kind of a little canyon mouth right there, and he just sits. And I'm like, what's he doing? Why isn't he going in and killing that deer? And the sun's starting to go down. I'm like, get off your butt. Go kill that deer. And I'm watching, and I'm wondering if he can't see it now. Did he lose sight of it? What's going on? And he sits there, and he comes up the hill afterward, and Brinker and I are like, what is he doing? Get up the hill, and later I'm asking him, I'm like, why? What was going? Why didn't you go kill that deer? And he's like, well, I was waiting for it to come to me. And I was thinking, I was like, well, why? Because I don't know, if you closed another 40 yards, that deer's dead. Mm-hmm. Why didn't you just you had time, just make your way up there? And he's like, do you know how many things can go wrong and how alert those deer are? All it takes is one rock or stick or branch, and then it's gone. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't kill it. And he said, but it doesn't know I was here, and it's going to be here tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And one of these times it's going to walk right to me, and I'm going to kill it. That whole idea, getting in just close and then just waiting for it. I tease him and tell him he's a tree stand hunter, just not with a tree. I'm like, that's not really spot and stalk, technically. That's ambush hunting. And but he definitely is like, I'm going to get within a range that I think I can get within, but he is so careful about not stalking to failure. That was not something I've ever really observed, thought about, or followed anyone else do before. I don't know. It was a paradigm shift for me. And as I've watched even more, especially in archery, Brian is not interested. He doesn't, more than anything, he doesn't want the deer to ever know he's there. And so he kind of, through experience, knows about where that buffer range is or what he can get away with. And he's conservative. And it seems to always work out. It seems to always be that it finally beds in a spot where he can just move right to shooting range. Or it seems to be that it eventually walks right to him and he kills it. And that level of patience, that style, that was new to me. And that's how I started hunting elk last year when I was solo. Just get in close, like just what you were describing earlier, kind of flowing with the elk as they moved. There was a couple of times where I almost rushed this opportunity. I could take the shot. I have it, But I'm like, you're still in the game. Why take a 65-yard shot? Why? Like, I don't really have to. And I'm getting worried because I know that the cows just went over a little lip and he's going to follow. And then maybe I'm going to lose him forever. But then I'm like, you're still in the game. There's still hours left. Don't take that 65-yard shot. Just don't. 70 yards, somewhere in there. I'm like, just don't. And so he goes over, and then I made my way there. And that happened 3 or 4 times that day. And this is toward the end of the hunt because I screwed up plenty a week earlier.
Yep.
But I'd been like, okay, either get the high percentage shot or don't get a shot at all. And then sure enough, I got that 35-yard shot and smoked him. But it was one of those things where it took that new style of just sort of getting close, but then, and you said it today in your lecture at the seminar, you were saying, don't take shots that you're not like sure you're going to make. That was a really big shift because I'm assuming guys that get it done are more like taking the opportunities that come. And how many times then, what if I took that 65-yard shot, 70-yard shot, my adrenaline's pumping, I'm shaking, and I'm trying to steady myself, and the bull's chasing, he's a big bull, and I'm a good shot. Mm-hmm. I've shot some bulls at that range, but I also know a lot can go wrong at that yardage, especially when I'm that amped. So being patient was a whole new thing for me. And in the end, it paid off big. Mm-hmm. And I'm finding like I'm changing in the woods a little bit.
Evolving.
Yeah. And you really kind of summarized a lot of all my new kind of approach and thoughts on this.
Oh, how cool. I'm so glad it resonated with you. Yeah, it's such an effective style of hunting. But yeah, that patience. You talk about that patience waiting for the right shot. It's tough. You want that shot so bad. You've been working all week for a shot. It's tough, but you just can't force that shot. You can't try to squeeze it in too tight of a window, too many branches, a weird angle on that elk. And also, I think an elk, they're such a big animal, they have a big vitals, but you have to put a precision shot on them. It's lungs, heart, or liver, or you don't get them. And yeah, I'd say I've got caught in the trap too. I'm always working on my shooting, and I pride myself at being clutch, making tough shots, making good shots. But I learned over the years that you're better off to get close and kill them than you are to shoot those longer shots. Like there's just so many things that can go wrong there. And if you do hit that bull bad at 70 yards, that ruins your whole season. The whole hunt is over. Instead, you got 4 or 5 more days to hunt. If it doesn't come together, you're still playing the game. You're still in it, and you don't have this huge low that you went down by missing the bull or by hitting them bad, ruining your hunt.
Right.
And so, yeah, I learned I can shoot a bow, but I like to get close and kill them. I know my effective range, and I don't need to get much closer than that. I don't need to sneak into 20 yards because, again, that's pushing to failure. When you get 20 yards from those animals, they're hypersensitive. And sometimes it works out that way where elk work into you really close and you get that 20-yard shot. But me, I like to, the majority of my animals, I'd say, are 30 to 50 yards. And I've learned some tough lessons over the years and just learned that, instead of taking that long shot, continue to play the game, let it develop. It may not even happen that day, but eventually it's going to work out. You get close and kill them.
So earlier you were talking about how, you'd cow call. You're in a place where nobody's pressured these. Like, no one's after him. Like, you're kind of back there. And you're in there and you move in. The first thing you do is cow call. And then the next thing you know, he responds, but he leaves. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah. I was really hunting the wilderness hard, and I was hunting solo, and I was looking for a big 6-point, like it didn't have to be a world record, but a mature herd bull. And so I'm traversing all this wilderness by myself back in Grizz country and, just covering country, trying to find the elk party. And gosh, I stumble upon this backcountry drainage, and there's nobody in it. And I catch this big 7x bull, and he's got all these cows, and he's just the bull of my dreams. And I watch him kind of push his cows into this timber, and at the head of the drainage, he can't really get out of there without me seeing him. So I know exactly where he's at. And he's just about bedding down. It's about 9 or 10 in the morning, but he's still pretty fired up. He's bugling pretty good. So I thought, okay, this is my chance. I'm not going to let them know I'm here. And even when I was calling, I always believed get to where those elk want to be, get close to them and inside their comfort level, then make a couple calls and they may come check you out. And so I got in close and had thermals coming uphill. And so I positioned myself above them in the timber and I got in close to where I wasn't spooking the cows, but I knew I was within 200-300 yards of this bull somewhere in that timber. And I set up, wind right in my face, and gave him a couple cow calls. Ew, ew, a couple of calves. Ew, ew. And start calling to him, and he screams right back at me. And I thought, oh, here we go. I'm going to kill my big wilderness bull. Couple more cow calls and he screams back at me, and I'm trying to position myself and get in the right spot so I can shoot him when he comes in. And then pretty soon I look and he's bugling, but heck, he is going straight away from me out of this drainage he was completely comfortable in, and I just got inside his space. And when you call to these elk, it's either going to happen or it's not going to happen. You know, there isn't much in between in it. It's not like you're going to leave him for another day, especially when you're in that close proximity.
Yeah.
And so I chased the bull of my dreams out of that draw, and now I have to start over locating an elk. And it was right then and there that I was like, these calls, I'm throwing them straight in the trash, and I'm going to stalk these things like mule deer. I'm not going to let that elk know I'm here, because I could have hunted that elk for a couple days in there.
Yeah.
And he's in a great feature where when he comes out in the evening, I've got a dominant win on that hillside. I can make a good play on him. You know, I probably would have killed him if I had the same mindset that I had today. So that's what really changed the tide for me. That, the elk coming in on pins and needles, calling in satellite bulls, all those things kind of combined to just make up my mind in my own head that it was like, I'm not going to call it these things anymore. I'm going to move on them like a predator, like a cat. I'm never going to let them know I'm here. And it's been the coolest experience for me too. I love the interaction with elk back and forth and the rut and the bugle. But there's something special when you pop over a ridge and there's bulls all over that are just popping off, and you hear 200-300 bugles and working down through the timber and another one and another one,
Right.
You know, and you're trying to figure out where they are, and you're just down in there making plays. And big parties like that, you know, you usually end up arrowing a pretty nice bull if there's that many ripping around. So for me, I just convinced myself of it, but I had to leave my calls in my truck because it was like a security blanket for me. It was like if I wasn't locating elk, it was a crutch. Exactly. I'd use it, or if it wasn't working out, I'd start making some calls and I'd blow it up again. So I finally just had to leave my calls in the truck and just start moving on these things. But as I did it, I started to develop these skills and get better at it. And then I started killing nice 6-point herd bulls consistently, just year after year. And so now I just believe wholeheartedly in it.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear that and to hear your seminar from this morning, because I like the idea. First of all, you know, I've seen elk, and even in high pressure, low pressure, doesn't matter, public land, over the counter type places, where if they don't know you're there, they behave in a totally different way. They're just loose and casual and screaming and careless. And no matter what, once I've let off an elk call of any kind, every elk in there is now paying attention in a way that they weren't before. Now I've got to deal with that. I've talked to some people like Jason Phelps. You know, Jason's not quiet or very sneaky. I talked to Corey Jacobson a couple years back after he had done that spot and stalk elk hunt with Randy Newberg, and he's like, I hated every minute of it. I hated it. I hated what did Dan Staten say today? He said it's stalking is yoga in the woods or something like that's. And Corey's like, I was cramping, my legs hurt, you know. And there's a certain, when you're spot and stalk, there's a ninja sort of cat kind of thing that you do all day. Ryan told me once, he's like, if you've stalked an animal right all day long, when you get back to camp, you're sore and exhausted, you know. And I think there are a lot of one-legged, just inch by inch movements, you know, slow movement. I mean, it is like yoga.
Slow and controlled. It's one yoga move on a stalk. Yeah, it absolutely is. Takes so much strength.
And I think that there are some people like Jason Phelps. He's like, Brian, I am no yoga person. I am a stomp through the woods and scream at elk kind of guy. And it works for those guys, they find a way. They like Corey's like, I'm looking for an elk that wants to play. Like you said, he's looking for the elk in the perfect moment, in the perfect timing, where he finally decides to play. But it might take 7-8 days of them grinding, calling until they get that magic moment where that one comes in. I am completely wired differently, I've found. And we talked about this offline. I really firmly believe that you ought to know your limitations, your strengths, what you're like, what you enjoy, and tailor your hunting around your skills, your kind of personality. And being conservative, I've always been like this sneaky type of hunter where I like to be really cautious, careful, methodical, take my time, move into position. I enjoy sneaking up, and I am lethal when I draw on an animal and it doesn't know I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm not lethal on? An animal that comes into a call and needle, sees me draw, and is looking at me. Like there is something about, and I see guys who are like, they're in the moment. Like they almost shoot better when it's a snapshot. It's in the moment. They draw, it's coming, they cow call, they stop, boom. I don't like that at all. I like them to never know I'm there. I want to draw on my own terms. I want to take my time, and I want to be the one that decides the shot, whether it goes off or doesn't go. Like, I want to be in, like, I want the luxury of not being seen or known when that arrow goes off. And knowing that about myself and how much more effective I am, it's like my heart rate goes so much higher when it's not that way. It's that much harder for me to execute that shot properly. So it's all right up my alley.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. And we all develop personal preferences in our own style of hunting. From what works for us and personality types, the country we hunt, there's elk live in different habitats, and so some styles work better than others. And so, yeah, I think it's just listening and taking people's point of view and then figuring out what works really good for you. And I think it's good to have all those tools in your toolbox and then be able to pull out the right one for the right scenario. Mm-hmm. I haven't quite been able to get there. I just tend to stick to the spot and stalk because it works for me, and I've proven it. And I know my system too, knowing what the right decision is and the wrong decision. And it is a gray area that every situation is different or every scenario is different. But just knowing, where you're likely to get a high percentage. Like, I love stalking elk in the evening. When I put them away in the timber, I know where they're at. I didn't blow them up, and they're coming back out in the feeding feature. They're coming back out in the open where I can keep my eyes on the elk. I can keep my eyes on their heads and their ears and where they're looking. And
the wind is in your face.
Yeah, those downhill thermals for that last hour is the most consistent winds of the day that I find. And so that's my good chance to close in and kill a bull. So knowing that rule, it's hard for me to charge in the timber and call to a bull in there when I know when he comes out at night, I'm going to get a really high percentage on him. So I tend to stick to spot and stalk, but everybody has to develop their own preferences and their own style that works for them. And that's the beauty of it.
I've noticed one thing that we like, another way I like to hunt is still a blend where the caller is 300, 400 yards away and doesn't move in any closer. Mm-hmm. Always just stays back there, just getting the bull irritated and amped, but he feels really safe because the elk is so far away. And it sounds like another herd, hot cow, and he's just going off, and the cows, and everyone gets agitated. I have found, like, last year, my buddy Brad Hunt was doing that while my cousin and I just snuck in. And it helped us because it's thick country. So the spot and stalk was a little hard to do because without them bugling, you wouldn't really know where they're at.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But then it's like you just inch your way in. And I've always done that. We've done that for years where we have one guy stay way back and just get them going while the other people kind of sneak in. Mm-hmm. Where it's tricky is, getting to the point of failure. What I've noticed when we do that and they get really amped is the satellites and the cows, they start coming down. And now they're 100 or 150 yards, from the bull I want to kill. And now they're bumping into me or going below me when the wind's hitting them and it's causing chaos. So it's sort of a hit and miss kind of way to do it. And when you're talking about stalking to failure, it's so much easier if you can avoid the failure, because then they round up and they're gone because the cows smelled me,
And elk relocate miles in drainages.
Yeah.
They're not like a muley where they go around the corner or a couple drainages and go back to being a muley. I do find that elk go back to being elk if you can keep with them. Spooked elk, sometimes you make a mistake. You come over a ridge and you think they're there and you end up busting an elk or busting a bull and they take off.
Yeah.
Well, my last ditch effort is to try to stay with those elk and try to see them and keep my eyes on them. And it's amazing. And sometimes I just got sweat running down in my eyes. I can't take off a layer. They go over the top of one ridge and I race for that ridge and I get just to the top of that and I barely see them go over the next ridge over the deal. And I get to that one and then barely see them go over the next. But if I can keep with those elk and travel with them for a few miles, all of a sudden they start to forget about it. They've moved enough distance and they'll kind of go back to being elk. So elk relocate a long ways away, but I have had decent success on a spooked elk, whether it's me that spooked it or sometimes I just catch an elk that, maybe was bumped by another hunter or bumped by something. But if I can keep with them, they do go back to being elk.
We've been doing that for years.
Oh, have you?
Like if we bump elk, we chase them. And they go over the run ridge. We of course we're far behind, but 3 to 5 miles is all you got to go, and then they'll just start being elk again. And then the other thing I've done in Colorado, especially, they would come off the mountains, feed in these meadows at night, and in the morning as the sun would come up, they'd head hot foot up the mountain. It was really tough to try to kill them in that meadow because they got there just too late after dark, and they'd take these different routes on their way in. And then they would get out of the meadow, and you were chasing them from behind, and they're moving out of the meadow when the wind's in their face. So if you try to get in front of them, they smell you, So it was just this battle. So what I figured out that worked was you let them feed all night, and then when they start heading up the mountain, you just follow them, and you follow them, and you follow them, and you follow them. And before you know it, you've gone 4 miles straight up, and you're sweating like crazy, and then they go into a wooded thicket and they bed for the day. And then the bull would get up and go wallow. And that's when I killed him. And so it's like, I feel like too many people quit. With elk, I say this all the time. It's work. It's work. I think you can run down elk a lot. You can chase elk a lot. My cousin Ben chases them too much to the point where but I've seen him sort of just dog elk all day for miles and then kill one. Because they get bumped and they run, but he's running too, and he heads them off and finds them, and then he goes to the next one, he bumps them again, and he just won't quit, and he just shadows them. Where most guys are like, well, we spooked them, they're gone, and he just goes. So I've seen it work so many times that it's part of our arsenal, but you have to be fit for that because they're not stopping.
I like it. Well, you're definitely fit. You made a great partner today on the challenge that Dan threw at us. That was pretty good, man. You pushed me in the end of that thing and those burpees. You're an animal in the mountains. Yeah, that was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was glad you were willing to do most of those push-ups because I didn't.
We made a good team, and we ended up winning it. But, you're in good shape. I am, too. I just pride myself on that. But, it's a big part of that elk hunting. Another big part, I think, and what brings to the forefront of my mind when you tell that story about it not working in that meadow and those elk going back up, it's just our ability to adapt, our ability to theorize. And I think it's our biggest advantage as humans is just being able to think through it and think outside the box. It's like these elk are so tough to kill with a bow and arrow. And sometimes it's like you're hitting your head against a wall. It just isn't working what you're trying. So I think to look at these scenarios and try to figure out, I think outside the box at how you can get on this elk that is going to work in this area, exactly like you did, not hunting them in that meadow and then following up because you had the wind right. And then they started to get to where they bed. When elk get close to where they bed, they mill around. That bull went to the wallow. You capitalized right there. But a lot of that success was thinking outside the box and your ability to theorize.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's also a mental just commitment. I'm not going to quit. Had I let them get out of range going up the mountain, the hunt would have been over for the day until they come back to the meadow. And then they always come back too late. And it was really tough to figure out where they had gone without going up because, it was just craggy, rocky mountains. And I'm like, where? And you go up one place and elk have a way of just disappearing, man.
They do.
They can just disappear, and then they seem like they're everywhere, screaming, rutting, and then the next thing you know, they head up the mountain and they're just gone. And you, so figuring it out. One thing you mentioned was hunting areas you're familiar with being a lethal, tactic, because you know where the wind kind of tends to blow and where they like to feed and then where they like to bed and kind of the patterns that they have. But I'm pretty sure, don't you also hit a lot of new country too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love exploring. I love exploring, hunting new elk country. Killed a bull in new country last year in Idaho, a place I'd never been. And so, yeah, I like to explore. And then it's just when you learn a good area and you have this knowledge of these elk that like this area when it snows or like this area during the second week of September, it's hard not to go back in there and go get into some epic elk action because you know where it's at and you know it's happening. When it snows and I see snowflakes falling, it's tough for me to be anywhere else in Montana but my home valley because I know where all those elk pop out and they're super parties and they're big 6-point bulls. And so I try to use the knowledge. And I'm also trying to explore new places and challenge myself in new country. And really going to new elk country is intimidating. It's easy to hunt the places you know, and you are effective doing it, learning that information, but you almost get stuck in a rut. And everything with Western hunting is always changing. Spots never quite stay the same.
Yeah.
Get a little worse or a little better, but then you're stuck in that rut where that's the only area you know, and you're scared to go anywhere else. And so I think it's a combination of it. I think it's a combination of using the knowledge that you've gained, knowing some areas that you can go into, and you don't have to learn those areas from scratch anymore. I don't have to spend 10 days in that basin. I know I can go up in there in a couple days and go chase them around in that area when they're in there. But I definitely think it's a combination. But we're explorers by nature, and we love to go see new country. So it doesn't matter if I'm in my home valley or not. I'm always going, well, what's over in that drainage now too? Or I'm trying to expand my knowledge.
The thing with areas that you know is that I come on is I know the wind patterns.
Oh yeah,
and that for me seems to be the most most critical stuff. So I know that if there's elk right here by 5 o'clock, I can go. 6 o'clock, I can just run in on him and get in position and try to kill one. Anytime before that, the wind's going all over the place. It's never going to work. And there's certain areas, like you mentioned today, you said there's basins and areas where it seems like elk love to hang out, where the wind is swirling, and you said like a washing machine, like the wind's just all over. You can't touch that meadow. Like if you try to go down there, and I've done this so many times, it's like, and I try to get in, and sure enough, some elk over here smells me when I'm almost about to kill this bull, and then they're gone. So you mentioned earlier, one of your favorite things is just to target in the evening. Like, what are some other ways that you like to hunt? What about the morning time? What about the afternoon? What are you doing during those times?
Yeah, that wind. More elk stalks have been blown by the wind than anything else on planet Earth.
I always say, if you can give me a consistent wind, I'll probably kill the animal.
That's it.
Just give me the wind.
If you can eliminate that element of it, you're a leg ahead of the competition for sure. And so I try to have a higher understanding of the wind. So I like what you said about learning country and learning the winds and what they do and having that knowledge. It's really advantageous, but I'm always trying to learn the wind in a mountain range. So it's not just checking my wind checker. It's checking my wind checker, but it's also understanding how the thermals move in that mountain range. And so like thermals, when the air's cool at night, it's falling down the hills, and the thermals follow the drainages and draws down the mountain. And so the air is all dropping off the top because it's cold air that's cooling that falls down. As the sun comes up in the morning, that first hour of morning, you got a pretty consistent downhill thermal because that air is still cool. As that sun comes up, it starts to warm that valley floor. When it warms that valley floor, it warms that air up around it. Now that air is warm and starts to rise. Now these thermals change, and those switching thermals can be really inconsistent. But once it changes, if it stays sunny, those thermals are coming uphill because that warm air is rising. And if it stays hot and sunny, they'll pretty much rise all day long. Now, if it gets overcast or you have a storm roll in, it's going to cool that air again, and that air is going to drop. And so,
or there's a creek down there or there's timber, and so it's nice, it's super cool, so that throws it off.
There's so many things that can affect it. So those are the thermal winds. And then the directionals are super important. Directionals usually come up about mid-morning. Directional winds, there's usually a dominant direction that they blow. So I use that Windy app. I mentioned it today. The Windy app, you can search different hours on your phone all the way up to a week, and it'll predict the wind speed and which direction it goes. And you can zoom into the topography of that mountain and see how that wind's going to move across. So now I know which way a directional wind's going to come throughout the day. And I know how it's going to come on that side hill. What I try to avoid is what you're talking about, the washing machine, the lee wind side. So when that directional wind blows hard against a hillside, the backside of that hillside is where that wind washes in there. So knowing that I have a south wind blowing against this south side and those elk are down in that north side, I know I'm not going to get a consistent wind down there.
Yeah.
So I had to learn that hard lesson. And the story I told today was about this basin that was the lee wind side that these elk would show up in every single year down in there. It was a rut party.
Yeah.
And every year I'd dive down in there and I'd spook those elk out because they'd win me because they're in that lee wind side.
They're tempting, but
it was so horrible. And I had to learn that hard lesson over and over and over. Finally, I learned it where I'm not going down in this basin, and I sat up and I just watched and listened and waited. And finally, there was a nice big 6-point that cut some cows, and he started heading up, and he crossed over from the north side onto the south side, and now he's running the south side ridge. Well, now I've got this dominant south wind blowing against his south side. Now he's in a spot where I've got a good wind. And so I cut him off as he was coming out, and then jumped in behind him. And then I just trailed him as he walked down this trail as he's working into his timber spot with his cows. He's in the back, cows are in the front. And so I'm just taking what he'll give me.
Yeah.
He disappears around the corner. I can get some more on him. I can get a little bit more, and then it gets over the next ridge. And so just playing that mobile stalk game with him until finally he goes over a little ridge and I'm 90 yards and I know I can make it to that ridge and pop over and he's 45 yards and able to put a good arrow in him and kill one of my best bulls to date. But it was all because I learned not to hunt those elk on that damn lee wind side, you know? But it's like a higher understanding of the wind, and I think it's so important in hunting for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, learning about that is tricky, figuring out what the wind is doing and then having the patience. So one of the things I like to do is in the morning, the evening's great. I like the evenings because it will never betray you. The wind just gets better and better as the night progresses. So you can push it all the way up to the limit. Mornings, first of all, the elk seem to always be moving to a bedding area in the morning. So now you're racing, and they want to move with the wind in their face. So everything's complicated. In the evening, it can depend where they're headed. But in general, if they're coming out into a feeding feature like you're describing, and the wind is solid, it's only going to improve every hour. In the morning, it's only going to get worse every hour. So I hate mornings because of that. Like the morning, every minute you're in a race against the wind switching on you right when you're getting close. And then back to stalking to failure, that's kind of the definition. You're like, man, I'm this close. But that wind is in the process of switching in the next 30 minutes. It's like, do you risk getting winded or, and get the shot, or do you back out? It's always a race against that time. That's why with the evenings, I'm always excited because it's like, hell yeah, now it's only going to get better every hour. The afternoons, though, are a favorite for me because a lot of times those elk bed, they're tired, they're sleepy, but that bull will get up and fart around and rake, and he seems more amped. Testosterone's going. The cows are lazy. And I feel like they're pretty vulnerable in that window to sneak up on and hunt. We've typically done it with calling, though, where we pretty much get as close as we can, and then we just scream and kind of call, and we've been able to get bulls to come out and shoot them there. But otherwise, as much as I like, the evening time, the afternoon is right up there, as a favorite. Mornings, I hate. I really they're sort of just...
it's a good chance to locate elk. And what I try to do is I try to just shadow that herd. And wherever they are, I just try to keep my eyes on them. And you're right, that wind is inconsistent in the morning and you're racing against it. But, they both have their advantages and disadvantages. Also, at night, it's getting dark on you and you can lose light, where in the morning, when you're trailing those elk, you don't lose light. You can keep on them throughout the day. And maybe
but I find that overall wind is my nemesis.
You're right.
It's the one that hurts the most.
That's a good way to look at it. No, you're spot on. That's why I like that evening hunt as well. I'm less apt to go all in the morning and more apt to go all in and gamble in the evening.
And then if I sneak out in the dark and they never knew I was there, I'm no harm, no foul.
No harm, no foul.
The one thing, back to directionals or just weather, when the wind, so this is what happens a lot for me. And when I've killed, in fact, most of my bulls that I have killed archery happen like this. The same weather, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, kind of predictable summer, September weather. And then Friday kicks in and there's a storm kind of brewing and the wind is going one direction hard. That's when I get it covers my sound. The wind is reliable and I am charging in on these elk and they're distracted by sex. So I'm able to get away with things. And so for me, as soon as I see some weather changing or the clouds come in, I'm like, okay, now I can rely on a wind, that is going to be good to me. And then I try to really strike. So sometimes I'm just waiting. Like last year, we were sitting there, early season, the first week of September, I'm watching elk every day, but they're not huntable because that wind is no good, no good. And when they are when the wind is good, I can't really get to them. So I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting. And it was killing us to just sort of sit there and wait. And I'm like, but there's no point. If I found an elk that was stalkable or something, I would have gone for it. And then all of a sudden, we got our weather. Boom. We were striking. And we were in it. It was fun. I didn't kill a bull, but we had our chances.
Action. That's what I live for, is that action of being into them, that thrill. That is so fun. Yeah, that you get a consistent directional and you're in the money. Just wind in your face, blowing hard. And I like the dominant wind side, not the lee wind side. If you can catch them on a dominant wind side, you can trust it. It's just a good hard wind.
But if we weren't patient the 3 or 4 days leading to that moment, then that weather day wouldn't have been any good.
It wouldn't even happen.
And that's how I've seen Ryan hunt coos in Arizona. I've seen him sit there and just watch all day. And he's waiting for, it's hot every day. And I see Ryan's waiting for a day when the clouds come in and it gets, for some reason, it gets this crazy wind. Now he knows what this coos deer has been doing for 3 or 4 days or 5 days. He's just waiting for that moment. Now's the moment he goes in and he kills. And so, but to sit there and wait 3 or 4 days in the blazing sun because the wind's going all over the place, it takes a certain level of patience and trust that it's going to work out or that it can work out. But it also takes some maturity going, look, like you said, you had to learn the hard way in that washing machine basin. It took a lot of that for me to finally go, Brian, it's a waste of time. Don't do it. Because in the old days, I just pushed to failure all the time. And then I just go try to find another bull, another bull. I don't do that anymore.
Smart. You're evolving. Yeah. Going to kill some big bulls in the process. I think that's the key to it. And it's tough to display that kind of patience, to be able to back out, to be able to call off a stalk. But it's tough to make those right decisions, but they are the right decisions, or to sit back and to be patient. And I think that's just part of our analyzing the situations and the scenarios and our instincts, letting our instincts take over to make good decisions from past experiences, and trying to be more patient and wait for that bull, wait for the good wind. The wind is everything, isn't it? You got a good wind, you can kill them. And I love what you said too, how it muffles your sound and blocks your sound. You can just get away with so much more. And also, all of those branches of those trees are all moving. There's so much movement around. So you can really get away with a lot. So that's a really good point. And I hadn't keyed in on that either, with storms moving in and the changing of the winds like that. But that's something where you can watch your forecast a little bit and know if something's
That's what
coming.
Ryan was doing in Arizona. He's like, well, on Thursday, it's supposed to be windy and stormy a little bit. That's the day I'm going to try to, go. you're going to wait 2 more days for that day? But then he's in their pocket and he kills them. It's like, wow. So
that's some next level knowledge, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It's just different. But one last thing I wanted to run by or just tell you about was my buddy Brad Hunt. He did he was in the elk calling championship last year. I think he got 3rd or 4th place. And he's a really good caller. And he interned with Gritty with us for a while for the summer and learned to edit and make video and everything. And we had a good time. But he came on a hunt with me for a few days and he did a bunch of calling and he's really good. Like his calling was special. So, and he's like, I don't know, 30 something, 30, barely 30 maybe. And he has killed 17 bulls in 17 years. And just an Idaho farm boy, that just loves to hunt. Well, we got to talking and I'm like, well, how many bulls have you, called in? Cause you're a really talented caller. And he's like, I don't know, 2. Like he doesn't kill with calling.
Really?
So he's in the elk calling contest, and he's good. And I see him just get elk going. Yet he pretty much spot and stalks elk.
Oh, that is wild.
So
yeah, that is wild.
He calls in elk for other people, but generally for himself, he's killed on his own. So this year we're going to go hunt together, the 2 of us.
He seems like a really good guy. I've just interacted with him a couple times. He seems like a good guy.
He's just you're polite. I always joke about how polite he is because he is so giving and nice and polite and friendly, and you're just like it feels a little awkward. You're so nice, like
I know
one
what
of those
you're saying.
people.
Yeah, almost too nice, but it's genuine.
Yep.
He really is that person, or it seems like
just
anyways.
how he is.
Yep.
But he hunted with Ryan and I in Arizona. And when guys are killing coos deer with bows, they have some stalking ability and some archery ability.
A lot of it. Success rate is about 3% for archery coos.
Right.
So yes.
And so, of course, Ryan, I go down there one year with Newberg. I almost got it done. But then the second year I go down there, Ryan comes too. We go out and I kill my first coos deer with bow. So I'm stoked. I roll into camp. It's exciting. It's an accomplishment, right? And so. And I'm soaking in the love because I did something that's really hard. Lampers pulls up. He drops his tailgate, and he's got a Boone and Crockett.
Giant
coos deer.
coos.
And it's his first coos deer hunt ever, and it's like day 2. And I'm just like, and then, of course, everybody ignored my deer and just focused on Ryan's because it was a sight to behold. I'm like, I'm always in the shadow, But so... Then this year we go, and again, I got another coos deer, which was great. Brad got a great buck that he shot, and it was his first ever coos deer hunt too, and pulled it off. But if you've killed 17 bulls in 17 years and you grew up and that's your thing, it didn't surprise me when the way he did his stalk and how he does it. He just has got that figured out.
That killer instinct. You just get it. You get that killer instinct and stuff just dies. When Ryan's hunting, something's going to die.
I know.
Usually when I'm on a bow hunt, there's a pretty good critter that dies. You just get that killer instinct.
I love watching these guys and seeing how they're doing it, And I really analyzed both Ryan and Brad. I had Brad on the podcast talking about a coos deer hunt. He's really an unassuming guy. But when he was describing how he got to his position, when the shadows moved, how he moved with the shadows, how the wind moved, and how he had to stay where he was at. Like, there is a lifetime of knowledge and experience that he just knows what to do and does it right, and he kills. It's pretty cool.
That's way cool. Those nuances of the stalk, those micro decisions, they determine whether you kill that deer or not. All 100 different decisions you made, where to step, where to hide behind this bush, all these micro decisions in your instincts, they determine whether you're successful or not. And it's not something that you can really think through, or it's just something you react to and that you feel and that you got to be this side. But it's amazing watching guys with really keen instincts like that and make the right moves.
Seeing them lay down flat on the ground because there's deer like 6 feet away, and them just breathing as light as possible for an hour and a half because there's a Boone and Crockett buck, 30 yards away behind a tree. It's just like that takes so much. I love that stuff. By
Yeah,
the way.
me
But
too.
it takes so much like discipline
Yes, dedication.
and dedication. And sure enough, they moved on, and then he was able to just inch his way up a little bit and, try to get that buck. And oh man. And so I love that stuff. So back to when it comes to spot and stalk and calling, I find it so much more rewarding to do that, to be that, silent predator. It's just more me.
Mm-hmm. It's more me too.
The calling thing, I don't know about Livesey here, but he probably...
You won't catch him spotting and stalking. He's all call, and he's really good at it and kills a bunch of elk. We all have our own styles.
Yeah.
There's no one way to skin a cat, and they all work. And there's probably more bulls shot from a call than shot from spot and stalk.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it just fits you and I and Ryan and guys
I feel
like
empowered
us.
when
Yeah.
I'm spotting and stalk.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like it's in the bull's decision when I'm calling.
Yeah, for sure.
But I enjoyed your seminar today.
Thank you
great.
so much. I enjoyed teaming up with you. That CrossFit was fun.
That was
enjoyed
awesome.
the podcast. I've just enjoyed getting to meet you and sit down with you and have some of these in-depth conversations and learn who you really are. Ryan speaks so highly of you as a hunting partner and a hunter, and so I'm really glad we got to connect at the
Appreciate
Western
that.
Summit.
Thank you. Folks, check out Brian over there at Eastman's. And how can they can just find you on iTunes, but do you have any kind of other presence on the website where you can go there and find it?
Nope. Anywhere you find podcasts, you can find Eastman's Elevated, and then social media. I'm on Instagram, but Facebook too, but Instagram's really where I post. Got a site, Eastman's Elevated, and then Brian Barney.
And Brian is with a Y, right?
Brian's with an I.
With an I.
Are you an I or a Y?
I'm an I.
Are you?
Yeah, but I don't
good, you're
find very
normal.
many that are with an I.
Yeah, an I.
It seems like that's the not the norm.
No.
And on your page, it's Brian _ Barney, and Barney is spelled Barney.
That's correct.
Check that out, and then it looks like there's some links there too, so people can follow that haven't been following you already. I know you have a lot of people that listen to this show that probably already follow your content, but for those that don't, go check it out. And thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.
Stay gritty, folks.